Good morning, everyone. It's Kim from the Shamrock Quilt Studio, and I'm here today to give you a little show and tell of a project we recently finished and how I've taken that one step further to make a different project. So let's get started on that. And welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Welcome back. I wanted to show you today about the alternatives you have to some of the projects you do and how sometimes you can take one project and turn it into something entirely different by just adding some borders. If you will recognize, please, the project that is up on our board, it is a block from our block of the month from 2024. It was the last block we finished, and the video for this came out December the 4th. And it was initially a 15-inch white background block. And when I made this, I made it from just remnants that I had from other projects, or I don't think there was anything that was a full cut of fabric. It was all something that something else had already been cut out of. So it's pretty limited in the amount of fabric I had. But strategically cutting it, I was able to get 2 additional borders and binding out of the small pieces of fabric I had. And I've turned this 15-inch block, which I would have originally intended to be part of a block of the month quilt or a pillow covering, as I've done for some of the other blocks, but I've turned this now into a wall hanging. And just the same way it's been turned into a wall hanging, if you had additional fabric, you could go even further and turn this into the center medallion of a small lap quilt or even a larger wall hanging. But I took this and I cut 2.5-inch strips from both the medium blue and the dark blue. And then I made a binding from the light blue because that was the one that I had the least amount of fabric. I had the most fabric of this one. And this particular fabric, this medium blue, is a fabric that's typically carried at Joann's. I don't know if they have it right now, but I know I've used this particular print in a pink on a project and then a blue on another project, and here we are using it on a third project. So I cut the 2.5-inch strips. I had a little more fabric of this one, so I used it for the bigger border. And it's not bigger, wider, it's just that it takes more to get around it. The further out you go, the more fabric you're going to have. So I just put on the flat borders. I didn't do mitered corners. And I did that for both of those colors. And then I trimmed up the batting and the backing, which I used just a solid blue in a coordinating blue for the back. And that's something I also had already. And the piece I had was just a little bit bigger than I needed, so it worked out perfect. And now I've got a little scrap to use in applique or for some other, maybe an EPP scrappy quilt or something. But I've just put that on, and then I put on this binding. And I think this binding was 2.5 inches as well when I cut it. I'll verify that and put it in the notes if it changed. Now this binding is just one that was a flat piece, and I turned it over on the edges like a single fold bias would be. And this one is not on the bias. This is a straight of grain. It does have the, where is one of the seams? Right here. It does have the diagonal seam joins, so it's very thin there at the joins. It doesn't get overly thick and cumbersome. And then I just hand stitched it on both the front and the back. The hand stitching on this went, well, let me back up a little bit. Both the quilting and the hand stitching on this went really quickly. I think I finished the hand quilting in probably about 4 or 5 hours. And then the hand stitching for this, probably about 2. It went really fast. Even though I was stitching both on the front and on the back by hand, it went really quick. And if you did a binding where you could machine stitch on one side, it would be even faster. But I think it's a really nice design. Now, as far as quilting, what I did was I echoed right on the edge of all of this, and I went really close to the snowflake so that the snowflake would stand out. It would almost give it a little extra puffiness in that snowflake. And then I stitched on the outside of the palest stripes so those would kind of pop out. And as a result, what you kind of get when you're up close to it is a 3D effect, because these have no stitching in them. These have one side of stitching and the dark blue ones have none. So it's almost like they kind of fade into the background a little bit, and it kind of gives it a little bit of that 3D effect. And then I stitched along the white section here, and then along the medium blue section here. So there's no stitching in the dark blue anywhere on this project. But I thought it turned out really nicely. It was a great way to add a few more materials that I already had and take a block, because I said I wasn't going to use these block of the months in a quilt. But take a block I had already created and turn it into something beautiful to look at. It's a finished project. Now, I've got this sitting on another project that's got a little bit of a gray background, so it almost looks like a mat there around it, but the end of the project is here. Now, what can I do with this, and what size is it? Let me grab a ruler and tell you. It is a finished size of 22.5 inches. And that, oops, go all the way around there. That is solely driven by the limit of fabric that I had. I certainly could have made it bigger with bigger borders. But at 22.5 inches, it could be used as a wall hanging. It's not so large that it couldn't be put in a frame if you had one. You might have to get one made. And I'll tell you, this frame I have on the wall, it was a custom made frame for somebody, and either they didn't like it or it was slightly off on the measurements, and I purchased this frame that would normally be over $100 for $10 on clearance. I don't quite understand why they didn't take it and cut it down for something smaller, but they elected to sell it, and I was happy to buy it at $10. And I use a piece of black foam core board set into this frame so that I could just pin things to it. It makes it really quick to switch things out and lovely to look at. So you might want to incorporate something like that into your home if you're doing a lot of wall hangings that are generally the same size. I could also use this as a decorative piece on a table. There's just so many ways. I could hang this on the inside of my front door. I have kind of a glass on my front door, so I could hang it there as an inside wreath. You could back it with something stiff and hang it in your window the same way that people might hang stained glass in their window. It would be pretty that way. There are just so many ways that you can use something like this, and if you're so inclined, take this and run off from it and make other things. You could make 4 of these and imagine what a lovely quilt you would have. Or find a coordinating pattern that you could use as a border for it and make it even larger. It would not be too difficult to take something like this and make a lap quilt. So there's always great ideas out there and ways to take something you have and turn it into something you want very quickly and economically. I hope you've enjoyed this second look at a project to see where we can take something, how we can continue to embellish it and make it a completely different project, even though it's the one we started with. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and share us with a friend. And don't forget, you can go back and look at this project and many others on the 2024 Block of the Month playlist. And if you're interested in the Dresden pattern, we have a playlist on modern Dresden where I've taken a Dresden pattern and paired it with some modern colors and fabric choices to get a completely different design. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time at the Shamrock Quilt Studio.